Woman pregnant for 3 years gave birth to a lizard. How did this true story start? To find out, watch the video to the end. But first, please subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications to get more stories like this. The day Harper Whitmore first realized something was wrong, the sky outside her tiny cabin in Deepwood was a peculiar shade of green. She had been sitting on her porch, nursing a cup of tea, when a strange fluttering sensation stirred deep within her belly. It wasn't unusual for a pregnant woman to feel movement, but Harper was no ordinary mother-to-be. She had been pregnant for 3 years, 3 long, grueling, and mysterious years. Harper's journey to this moment was anything but normal. She had always been an adventurous soul, a woman who lived for the thrill of exploring the unknown. It was on one of her expeditions, deep in the uncharted rainforests of South America, that she had encountered something unexplainable, a radiant stone, glowing faintly in the dim light of the jungle. Something about it had called to her, and against her better judgment, she touched it. The warmth of the stone surged through her body, and from that moment, everything changed. When Harper returned home weeks later, she discovered she was pregnant. At first, she believed it was a miracle, the child she had always dreamed of but never thought she would have. The doctors were perplexed by her rapid hormonal changes but assured her it was a healthy pregnancy. However, as the months turned into years, her joy turned to dread. Her body remained in a perpetual state of pregnancy, her belly growing but never delivering. The doctors had no answers. Friends and family drifted away, unable to understand the bizarre situation. Harper became a recluse, retreating to the cabin her late grandmother had left her. But Harper wasn't completely alone. The people of Deepwood, a small and superstitious town, had their theories about her predicament. The town's gossip network was spearheaded by Linda Hayes, the owner of the local diner. Linda was a sharp-tongued woman in her 50s who thrived on drama. She often referred to Harper as the cursed one and warned others to stay away. But not everyone heeded her advice. Claire Thompson, Harper's childhood best friend, was one of the few who remained loyal. Claire was a nurse at the town clinic and had a pragmatic approach to life. She visited Harper regularly, bringing groceries and news from the outside world. "You know you could come back to town," Claire would say during her visits. "People talk, but they'd forget if you just showed up and proved you're still the same Harper." But Harper wasn't so sure. The whispers of her being cursed or carrying something inhuman weighed heavily on her. And then there was Dr. Elias Moreau, the enigmatic and controversial biologist who had recently moved to Deepwood. He had heard of Harper's unusual case and offered his help, claiming he had seen similar anomalies during his research on rare genetic mutations. "I believe your condition might be linked to something beyond our current understanding of biology," Dr. Moreau had said during their first meeting. His dark eyes had an intensity that made Harper both uneasy and intrigued. "I'd like to study your case further." Harper wasn't sure whether to trust him, but desperation had a way of pushing people into uncertain alliances. The tension in Harper's life escalated one stormy evening when she experienced an episode unlike any before. The fluttering sensation in her belly became violent, almost as if the baby, if it could still be called that, was trying to escape. Harper doubled over in pain, clutching her stomach as she screamed. Claire, who had been visiting at the time, called Dr. Moreau in a panic. When the doctor arrived, his reaction was far from clinical. His eyes widened with what Harper could only describe as awe. "It's happening," he whispered under his breath. "What's happening?" Harper gasped through the pain. But Dr. Moreau didn't answer. Instead, he began setting up strange instruments he had brought in a leather bag. Claire watched him suspiciously, her arms crossed. "What are you doing?" "She needs to go to a hospital." "No hospital can handle this," Dr. Moreau replied firmly. "This is beyond medical science." The room fell silent except for Harper's labored breathing. Outside, the storm raged on, lightning illuminating the forest in flashes of eerie green light. It was then that Linda Hayes, drawn by her insatiable curiosity, appeared at Harper's door. She had seen the doctor's car parked outside and decided to investigate. "What in God's name is going on here?" Linda demanded, barging into the cabin. Her eyes darted to Harper, then to Dr. Moreau's strange equipment. "Is this some kind of witchcraft?" Claire rolled her eyes. "Linda, you need to leave. Now is not the time." But Linda wasn't one to back down easily. "People in town have a right to know if something unnatural is happening here," she said, pointing an accusatory finger at Harper. "And mark my words, if it's dangerous, I'll make sure everyone knows." Harper wanted to yell at Linda to get out, but the pain was too intense. Instead, she focused on Dr. Moreau, who was now injecting her with something. "What are you doing to me?" she asked weakly. "Trust me," he said. "This will help you through the delivery." "Delivery?" Claire echoed in disbelief. "You mean she's finally going to?" Before she could finish, Harper let out a scream that shook the walls of the cabin. Something was happening, something primal and terrifying. The room seemed to pulse with an energy that made the air feel thick. Linda, for all her bravado, backed away, her face pale. And then it happened. Harper felt a final, excruciating push, and the room was filled with an eerie silence. When she opened her eyes, she saw Dr. Moreau cradling something in his hands. A small, reptilian creature with glistening scales and glowing yellow eyes. What is that?" Linda stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Moreau looked at the creature with a mixture of fascination and reverence. "It's a miracle," he said. But Harper didn't feel miraculous. She felt empty, confused, and terrified. "Is that my baby?" she asked, tears streaming down her face. Dr. Moreau nodded. "In a way, yes. But this is only the beginning." The room remained frozen in a mixture of awe and terror as the creature let out a small, chirping sound that seemed to echo unnaturally. Harper, still trembling and drenched in sweat, couldn't tear her eyes away from it. Her breath hitched in her throat, and she struggled to comprehend what she was seeing. "What do you mean, only the beginning?" Claire demanded, stepping between Harper and Dr. Moreau, her protective instincts kicking in. "You knew this would happen, didn't you?" Dr. Moreau carefully wrapped the creature in a cloth, his hands steady despite the chaos around him. "I suspected," he admitted, his voice calm. "But I didn't know for certain. This is extraordinary, beyond anything I've ever encountered. Harper is part of something far greater than any of us." "Greater?" Linda interjected, her voice shrill. "She just gave birth to a lizard. How is that greater? This is an abomination." "Linda, shut up," Claire snapped. "You're not helping." But Linda wasn't about to back down. She pulled out her phone and began recording. "The whole town needs to see this. People need to know the truth about what's been going on here." "Stop," Harper cried, finding her voice at last. Her hands shook as she tried to sit up. "This is my child, whatever it is. You don't get to exploit it." Linda sneered. "Exploit it? Harper, this isn't normal. This is a danger to everyone. For all we know, that thing could grow up and destroy us all." "That thing," Harper said, her voice trembling with anger, "is my baby. And I will not let you treat it like a monster." The creature let out another chirping sound, this time louder, and its glowing yellow eyes seemed to fixate on Linda. She took a step back, suddenly uneasy. "You're all insane," she muttered, but she hesitated, glancing at the door as if unsure whether to stay or run. Dr. Moreau, meanwhile, was observing the creature intently, his scientific curiosity overriding any fear or moral judgment. "Fascinating," he murmured, running a hand along its tiny, scaly back. "Its anatomy is remarkable, so delicate yet so advanced. Harper, you must let me study it." "Study it?" Harper echoed, horrified. "It's not a specimen. It's my child. You can't take it away from me." "I'm not suggesting that," Dr. Moreau said quickly. "But we need to understand what this is, what it means. This could be a breakthrough for humanity. Or a curse," Linda muttered darkly, still clutching her phone. She had stopped recording but hadn't put the device away. Her eyes darted nervously between the creature and the others in the room. "Mark my words, nothing good will come of this." Before anyone could respond, the creature let out a sudden high-pitched screech. The sound was piercing, almost inhuman, and the lights in the cabin flickered violently. Everyone froze as the room plunged into darkness, illuminated only by the occasional flash of lightning from the storm outside. "What the hell was that?" Claire whispered, her voice barely audible over the pounding rain. Dr. Moreau's expression shifted from fascination to concern. "It must be sensitive to the energy around us. The storm, the tension, it's reacting?" "Reacting to what?" Harper asked, clutching her stomach as a residual ache coursed through her. "What's happening to me?" "It's connected to you," Dr. Moreau said, his voice steady but grave. "Whatever this is, you're not just its mother. You're its anchor." "Anchor?" Claire repeated, her voice rising. "What does that even mean? You're talking like this is some kind of alien creature." Dr. Moreau didn't answer immediately. Instead, he carefully placed the creature on a nearby table, where it curled up, its glowing eyes still fixed on Harper. "I don't think this is alien," he said finally. "I think it's ancient. Harper, when you told me about the glowing stone in the jungle, I started researching. There are legends, stories of beings like this, creatures born from the union of human and something else. They were said to be guardians or perhaps warnings of great change. That's insane, Claire said, shaking her head. You're basing all of this on myths? Sometimes myths have a basis in truth, Dr. Moreau replied calmly. And if I'm right, this child, this being, could be the key to something far beyond our understanding. Enough! Harper shouted, her voice breaking. Tears streamed down her face as she struggled to process everything. I don't care about legends or science or any of this. All I know is that I just gave birth to something no one understands and I need answers. Real answers. Dr. Moreau nodded, his expression softening. And you'll have them, I promise. But we need to proceed carefully. There are forces at play here that we don't fully understand. Forces? Linda scoffed, regaining some of her bravado. You sound as crazy as she does. I'm telling you, this is a disaster waiting to happen. Then leave, Claire snapped, her patience finally wearing thin. If you're so scared, go back to your diner and spread your gossip. But stop making this harder for Harper. Linda opened her mouth to retort but seemed to think better of it. With one last glare at Harper and the creature, she turned and stormed out into the rain. As the door slammed shut behind her, Harper let out a shaky breath. The creature on the table made a soft, almost comforting sound, and for the first time, Harper felt a strange connection to it, an inexplicable bond that went beyond words. What do I do now? She whispered, looking at Claire and Dr. Moreau. We take it one step at a time, Claire said gently, sitting beside her. You're not alone in this. Dr. Moreau nodded. We'll figure this out together. But Harper, you need to be prepared. Whatever this child is, it's going to change everything. Outside, the storm continued to rage, and in the shadows of the forest, unseen eyes watched the cabin intently. The birth of the creature was only the beginning. The storm outside continued to batter the cabin, the howling wind carrying an almost mournful sound that seemed to echo through the dense woods. Harper sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the tiny, scaled creature that had just turned her world upside down. It was nestled in a makeshift blanket on the table, its luminous yellow eyes blinking slowly, almost rhythmically. Each breath it took seemed to sync with Harper's own, as though they were connected on some unseen level. Harper, Claire began softly, breaking the tense silence. She knelt down beside her friend, her face etched with concern. How are you feeling? Really? Harper let out a shaky laugh, wiping her tear-streaked face with trembling hands. How do you think I feel, Claire? I've been pregnant for 3 years only to give birth to this. I don't even know what it is. I don't even know what I am anymore. You're still you, Claire said firmly, placing a hand on Harper's knee. You're still Harper Whitmore, the bravest, most stubborn woman I know. This doesn't change that. Dr. Moreau, who had been quietly examining the creature from a distance, spoke up. Actually, it might change that, he said, adjusting his glasses. Harper, whatever happened to you when you touched that stone in the jungle, it altered you on a fundamental level. Your body carried this child for 3 years, something no human body should be able to sustain. Yet here you are, alive and healthy. That alone defies logic. And that's supposed to make me feel better? Harper snapped, her frustration bubbling to the surface. You're talking about me like I'm some kind of experiment? I'm not trying to upset you, Dr. Moreau said, his tone calm but insistent. But we need to face the facts. This creature isn't just an anomaly, it's a phenomenon. And it's tied to you in ways we're only beginning to understand. Claire shot him a glare. Could you stop with the cryptic scientific jargon for 1 second? She just gave birth. She doesn't need a lecture right now. Dr. Moreau raised his hands in a gesture of surrender. Fair enough. But the sooner we understand what we're dealing with, the better. Harper, has the child done anything unusual since it was born? Aside from the glowing eyes, I mean. Harper hesitated, her mind racing back to the moment the creature let out that piercing screech. The way the lights had flickered, the way the air had felt charged with energy, it had been unlike anything she'd ever experienced. But before she could answer, there was a loud banging on the door. Claire jumped to her feet, her heart pounding. Who the hell could that be in this weather? Harper's stomach churned with unease. Linda wouldn't come back, would she? Dr. Moreau moved cautiously toward the door, motioning for the women to stay back. He opened it just a crack, the wind immediately whipping rain into the room. Standing on the porch was Sheriff Dean Carter, his broad-shouldered frame silhouetted against the storm. Evening, Doc, the sheriff said, tipping his hat. His voice was calm, but his eyes were sharp, scanning the room behind Dr. Moreau. Mind if I come in? Dr. Moreau hesitated, then stepped aside. Of course, Sheriff. What brings you out here in this weather? The sheriff stepped inside, shaking the rain from his coat. His boots left muddy footprints on the cabin floor. "I got a call from Linda Hayes," he said, his gaze landing on Harper. "She says there's something unusual going on up here." Claire groaned, running a hand through her hair. Of course she did. That woman can't mind her own business for 5 minutes? The sheriff's expression didn't change. "I've known Linda a long time. She's prone to exaggeration, but she's not usually a liar. She said there's a creature here, something not human." Harper felt her throat tighten. She glanced at the table where the creature lay, now silent and still, as though it understood the danger of being discovered. "What are you talking about, Sheriff?" Claire said quickly, stepping in front of Harper protectively. Linda's always been suspicious of Harper. She's just looking for an excuse to stir up trouble. The sheriff's eyes narrowed slightly. "Is that so? Then I suppose you won't mind if I have a look around?" "You don't have a warrant," Claire shot back, crossing her arms. "I don't need one," the sheriff said evenly. "Not when there's a potential threat to public safety." Before anyone could argue further, a low, guttural sound filled the room. It was coming from the table. The creature had uncurled itself and was now sitting upright, its glowing eyes locked onto the sheriff. Its tiny claws flexed, and the air around it seemed to shimmer with an almost imperceptible heat. "What the hell is that?" the sheriff demanded, his hand instinctively reaching for the gun at his hip. "Don't!" Harper shouted, moving between the sheriff and the creature. "It's my child. It's not dangerous." The sheriff's hand froze, but his expression was one of disbelief. "Harper, that's not a child. That's something else. You can't keep it here. It's not safe, for you or anyone else." "It's not your decision to make," Harper said fiercely. "This is my home, my family. You have no right to take it from me." The creature let out another low sound and the lights flickered again. The sheriff took a cautious step back, his hand still hovering near his gun. "I don't like this, Harper. I don't like it one bit. But I'm not here to hurt anyone. I just need to make sure no one else gets hurt." "No one's getting hurt," Dr. Moreau said, stepping forward. "Sheriff, I understand your concerns, but this situation is under control. Harper and the child are safe, and I'm monitoring everything closely." The sheriff didn't look convinced, but he slowly lowered his hand. "I'm going to hold you to that document. But if I hear even one rumor about this thing causing trouble, I'm coming back. And next time, I won't come alone." With that, he turned and walked out into the storm, slamming the door behind him. Harper sank back onto the bed, her head in her hands. "This is a nightmare," she whispered. "It's going to be okay," Claire said, sitting beside her. "We'll figure this out." But deep down, Harper wasn't so sure. She looked at the creature, now curled up once more, and felt a deep, gnawing fear. What if Linda and the sheriff were right? What if this child wasn't just unusual, but dangerous? Outside, the storm raged on, and somewhere in the distance, a low, guttural growl echoed through the woods. The cabin felt heavy with unease long after Sheriff Carter left. Harper sat silently on the edge of her bed, her arms wrapped around her knees as the soft chirping sounds of the creature occasionally broke the tension. Claire paced the room, muttering angrily under her breath about Linda and the sheriff's interference. Dr. Moreau, ever the picture of calm curiosity, hovered near the table, observing the creature with a journal in hand, scribbling down notes like a man possessed. "It's only a matter of time before the whole town knows," Claire said finally, breaking the silence. She turned to Harper, her expression a mixture of sympathy and urgency. "You need to think about what comes next. Linda won't stop and neither will Carter. People are going to start showing up here and they're not going to understand. What do you expect me to do?" Harper replied, her voice cracking. "Run? Right. Where would I even go? And with," she gestured weakly to the creature. "I can't just disappear." "She's right," Dr. Moreau interjected, not looking up from his notes. "Leaving now would only draw more attention. But staying here isn't sustainable either. You'll need a plan, something to keep you and the child safe." The word child felt like a knife twisting in Harper's chest. As much as she wanted to see the creature as her own, it was becoming harder to ignore the signs that it was far from human. Its strange, guttural noises, the way the air seemed to hum when it was agitated, and the unnatural glow of its eyes all hinted at something otherworldly. And yet, when it looked at her, she felt a connection she couldn't explain. It wasn't just fear or maternal instinct, it was something deeper, something ancient. "I don't need a plan," Harper said quietly, more to herself than to the others. "I just need time. Time to figure out what this is and what it means." Dr. Moreau nodded thoughtfully. "Time is critical, yes. But so is preparation. The sheriff may have backed off for now, but Linda won't stop. She'll stir up the town until they're at your doorstep with pitchforks and torches. She's just a bitter old woman with too much time on her hands, Claire said, though her tone lacked conviction. Let her talk. No one's going to believe her. Don't be so sure, Dr. Moreau said, setting his pen down and folding his hands. Fear is a powerful motivator, especially in a place like Deepwood. People here are already superstitious. It won't take much for them to turn on Harper. As if on cue, a sharp crack of thunder shook the cabin, and the lights flickered again. Harper glanced at the creature, which had begun to stir, its tiny claws flexing against the fabric of the blanket. The flickering lights weren't a coincidence, she could feel it. Whatever connection she had to the creature, it seemed to extend beyond the physical. Its emotions, its energy, were intertwined with hers and the environment around them. What if they're right? Harper whispered, her voice barely audible. What if it is dangerous? Claire stopped pacing and knelt in front of her, gripping her hands tightly. Listen to me. I've known you my whole life, Harper. You've always been stronger than anyone gave you credit for. This thing, whatever it is, it's still yours. You didn't ask for any of this, but you've handled it so far and you'll keep handling it. You're not alone in this. Harper nodded, though the doubt in her heart remained. She wanted to believe Claire, but the look in the sheriff's eyes, the fear in Linda's voice, they lingered in her mind like a dark shadow. Dr. Moreau cleared his throat. I think it's time we start looking for answers. Real answers. Harper, you mentioned the glowing stone in the jungle. Do you remember exactly where you found it? Harper frowned, trying to recall the details. It was deep in the rainforest, near a river with black water. There was a cave, small, almost hidden. Inside was the stone, just sitting there, glowing like it was alive. Dr. Moreau's eyes lit up. A blackwater river and a glowing stone. That sounds like the legends of the Eldra Nexus. The what? Claire asked, raising an eyebrow. The Eldra Nexus, Dr. Moreau repeated. It's an ancient phenomenon described in some South American folklore. A place of power where the veil between worlds is said to be thin. Some believe it's a gateway to another dimension, others think it's a source of primordial energy. Either way, it's said to be capable of transforming anyone who interacts with it. Harper stared at him, her stomach twisting. You think that stone transformed me? I think it left a mark on you, Dr. Moreau said carefully. And this child, this creature, might be the result of that. It's not just a mutation or an anomaly. It's something unique and dangerous, Claire muttered, glancing at the creature uneasily. Not necessarily, Dr. Moreau countered. But we need to understand it before we can make that determination. Harper, would you be willing to let me run some tests? Non-invasive, of course. Harper hesitated, her protective instincts flaring. I don't know. I don't want to put it through anything that might hurt it. I understand, Dr. Moreau said gently. But the more we know, the better we can protect it, and you. Before Harper could respond, a loud crashing sound came from outside. All three of them froze, their eyes darting to the window. The storm was still raging, but this sound was different, closer, heavier. What was that? Claire whispered, her voice tense. Dr. Moreau moved to the window, peering out into the darkness. I can't see anything, he said, his voice low. But we should be careful. It might be the storm, or it might be something else. Harper's heart pounded as she reached for the creature, cradling it against her chest. It let out a soft, almost purring sound, its warm body radiating a strange comfort. What if it's the sheriff? Or Linda? I don't think so, Dr. Moreau said, turning back to them. Stay here. I'll check it out. No way, Claire said firmly. We stick together. If something's out there, we face it together. Dr. Moreau hesitated, then nodded. The three of them moved toward the door, Harper clutching the creature tightly as Claire grabbed a flashlight and Dr. Moreau picked up a sturdy piece of wood. The storm seemed to grow louder as they stepped outside, the wind whipping around them and the rain soaking them instantly. In the darkness, a pair of glowing eyes stared back at them from the edge of the woods. Harper froze, clutching the creature against her chest as her heart hammered in her ears. The glowing eyes at the edge of the woods were unlike anything she had ever seen, large, menacing, and eerily familiar. For a moment, no one moved. The storm raged on around them, the wind and rain seeming to amplify the tension. What is that? Claire whispered, her voice trembling. Dr. Moreau stepped forward cautiously, his makeshift weapon clutched tightly in his hands. Stay behind me, he said, his voice calm but firm. It could be an animal or what? Harper demanded, her voice rising in panic. What else could it be? Before Dr. Moreau could answer, the creature in Harper's arms stirred. It let out a low, guttural sound, a sound that seemed to resonate with the glowing eyes in the distance. The figure in the woods shifted, stepping closer. Lightning flashed, illuminating the figure for a split second, and what Harper saw made her blood run cold. It was tall and humanoid, but its body was covered in dark, iridescent scales. Its limbs were elongated, almost spindly, and its glowing yellow eyes bore an uncanny resemblance to the creature in her arms. For a brief moment, Harper thought she saw recognition in its gaze, as if it were looking not at her, but at the child she held. "Oh my God," Claire breathed. "It looks like it's the same species," Dr. Moreau finished, his voice filled with awe. "This isn't just a coincidence. Harper, I think this is a parent, or at least some kind of relative." "A relative?" Harper echoed, her voice shaking. "What are you talking about? How can it be related to this?" She held the creature closer, as if shielding it from the entity in the woods. The larger creature stepped closer, its movements slow and deliberate. It let out a low rumbling sound that sent a chill down Harper's spine. The creature in her arms responded with a similar sound, squirming in her grasp as if trying to reach out to the larger being. "No," Harper said, backing away. "No, I won't let you take it." "Harper, wait," Dr. Moreau said, holding up a hand. "We don't know what it wants. It might not be here to harm us. It doesn't look like it's here to play patty cake either." Claire snapped, pulling Harper further back toward the cabin. "We need to get inside. Now." The larger creature stopped a few feet away, its glowing eyes fixed on Harper. It crouched low, almost as if it were trying to make itself less threatening. For a moment, the tension in the air seemed to ease. But then another sound emerged from the woods, a high-pitched screech that made everyone freeze. More glowing eyes appeared in the darkness. 1 pair. 2. 3. Soon, a dozen pairs of glowing yellow eyes were staring at them from the trees. Harper's knees nearly buckled as fear consumed her. Whatever was happening, it wasn't good. "We're surrounded," Dr. Moreau said, his voice tight. "Everyone back inside. Now." They retreated to the cabin as quickly as they could, slamming the door shut and locking it behind them. Harper set the creature down on the table, her hands trembling as she tried to catch her breath. Outside, the glowing eyes moved closer, their faint light visible through the rain-streaked windows. "What do they want?" Claire asked, her voice breaking. "Why are they here?" "I don't know," Dr. Moreau admitted, pacing the room. "But it's clear they're drawn to the child. It must have sent out some kind of signal, some instinctual call." "You're saying it brought them here?" Harper demanded, her fear turning to anger. "Why? Why would it do that?" "It's not doing it consciously," Dr. Moreau said quickly. "It's just part of its nature. Whatever it is, it's connected to them." "Well, great," Claire said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Now we're stuck in here with a bunch of glowing-eyed monsters outside. What's the plan, genius?" Dr. Moreau didn't answer immediately. He moved to the window, peering out at the creatures gathered outside. They weren't attacking, but their presence was undeniably menacing. The larger one, the first to appear, stood at the forefront, its glowing eyes fixed on the cabin. "I don't think they want to hurt us," Dr. Moreau said finally. "They're waiting for something." "Waiting for what?" Harper asked, her voice rising. "For us to hand over my child?" Dr. Moreau turned to her, his expression serious. "Maybe. Or maybe they're waiting for a sign that they can trust us. Harper, this child, it's not just yours. It's theirs too. If we don't handle this carefully, it could escalate into something far worse." Harper's chest tightened. She looked at the creature on the table, which was now watching her with its glowing eyes. It chirped softly, almost reassuringly, and for the first time, Harper felt a strange sense of calm. She didn't know why, but she felt like it was trying to communicate with her. "What if I go out there?" Harper said suddenly, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her. "What if I show them I'm not a threat?" "Absolutely not," Claire said immediately. "That's insane. You don't know what they'll do." "She might be right," Dr. Moreau said, surprising both women. "If they're here for the child, they won't leave until they get it. But if Harper goes out there, she might be able to reason with them, show them she's not the enemy." "You can't seriously be suggesting this," Claire said, her eyes wide. "What if they attack her?" Dr. Moreau hesitated. "It's a risk. But it might be the only way to resolve this without violence." Harper swallowed hard, her mind racing. Every instinct told her to stay inside to protect herself and the child. But deep down she knew Dr. Moreau was right. These creatures weren't going to leave, not without some kind of resolution. "I'll do it," she said finally, her voice firm. "I'll go out there." "Harper, no." Claire protested. You don't have to do this. Yes, I do, Harper said, meeting her friend's gaze. This is my responsibility. I need to protect my child, and if that means facing whatever's out there, then so be it. Before Claire could argue further, Harper picked up the creature and headed for the door. Her hands trembled as she gripped the doorknob, but she didn't hesitate. She stepped outside into the storm and faced the glowing eyes in the darkness. The rain struck Harper's face like icy needles as she stepped out onto the porch, cradling the small, scaled creature against her chest. The storm whipped her hair around her face, but her focus was locked on the glowing eyes staring back at her from the shadows of the woods. The larger creature stepped forward, its movements slow and deliberate, as though it was wary of her reaction. Behind it, the smaller figures remained still, their eyes glowing faintly in the storm's darkness. Harper's heart pounded in her chest as she tightened her grip on the creature. I don't know what you want, she said, her voice trembling but loud enough to be heard over the storm. But you can't take it. It's mine. I'm its mother. The larger creature paused, tilting its head as though it were studying her. Its glowing eyes flicked down to the bundle in her arms, and it let out a low, resonant sound that seemed to vibrate through the air. The smaller creatures responded with a series of chirping and clicking noises, creating an almost harmonic symphony that sent chills down Harper's spine. Dr. Moreau and Claire stood just inside the cabin, watching anxiously through the doorway. She's actually doing it, Claire whispered, her nails digging into the wooden frame of the door. She's out there talking to them. She's incredibly brave, Dr. Moreau murmured, though his eyes never left the scene. Let's hope they recognize that. The larger creature stepped closer, now only a few feet from the porch. Its massive frame loomed over Harper, but its movements remained slow, almost cautious. Harper's legs shook, but she stood her ground, her maternal instincts outweighing her fear. What do you want? She asked again, her voice steadier this time. Why are you here? The creature raised one long, clawed hand and pointed directly at the bundle in her arms. The motion was deliberate, and for a moment, Harper thought she understood. It wasn't just here for the child, it wanted something more. You want me? Harper asked, her voice barely audible. The creature let out another low sound, its glowing eyes softening ever so slightly. It crouched low, bringing its head level with hers, and for the first time, Harper saw something in its expression that she didn't expect. Recognition. This wasn't just a random encounter. This creature knew her, or at least knew of her. Suddenly, the creature in her arms squirmed, letting out a series of high-pitched chirps. The larger being responded with a similar sound, and Harper felt a strange, almost magnetic pull between them. The connection was undeniable. I don't understand, Harper said, her voice breaking. Are you family? Are you here to take it back? The creature reached out slowly, its massive clawed hand stopping just short of Harper's. She hesitated, her breath hitching as she stared at the outstretched hand. Every instinct screamed at her to pull back, to retreat to the safety of the cabin, but something deeper urged her to stay. What are you doing? Claire shouted from the doorway. Harper, don't. It's okay, Harper called back, though she wasn't entirely sure she believed it herself. She extended her free hand toward the creature, her fingers trembling. The creature's claws brushed against her palm, and a sudden surge of warmth shot through her body. Images flooded her mind, fragments of memories that weren't her own. She saw the glowing stone in the jungle, surrounded by ancient carvings that pulsed with energy. She saw beings like the one before her, standing in a circle around the stone, their claws raised in a ritualistic gesture. She saw herself touching the stone for the first time, and the energy that flowed into her body. And then she saw the creature in her arms, an egg nestled deep within her womb, waiting to be born. Harper stumbled back, gasping for air as the connection broke. The larger creature withdrew its hand, watching her intently. I saw it, she whispered, her voice shaking. I saw everything. What are you talking about? Claire demanded, stepping onto the porch. What did you see? They're not here to hurt us, Harper said, turning to face her friend. They're here because of me. Because she stopped, struggling to find the words. Because I'm part of this now. They're not just here for the child. They're here for me. What does that even mean? Claire asked, her voice tinged with frustration and fear. Are you saying you're one of them? No, Harper said quickly. Not exactly. But when I touched that stone, something changed. It connected me to them. To their world. Dr. Moreau stepped forward, his eyes wide with a mix of awe and excitement. Of course. That explains everything. The stone must be some kind of ancient artifact. A bridge between dimensions. When you touched it, it didn't just alter you physically. It bound you to them, Harper. You're a part of their lineage now. Harper shook her head, overwhelmed by the weight of his words. I didn't ask for this. I didn't want any of this. I know, Dr. Moreau said gently. But it's not just about what you want anymore. It's about what's already happened, and what's still to come. The larger creature let out another low sound, drawing Harper's attention. It gestured toward the woods, then back to her, as if inviting her to follow. Harper's heart sank. She knew what it wanted, even if she didn't fully understand why. You want me to go with you, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The creature nodded slowly, its glowing eyes filled with an almost mournful understanding. No? Claire shouted, stepping between Harper and the creature. You can't just leave. You don't even know where they're taking you. Harper looked at Claire, tears streaming down her face. I don't think I have a choice, she said. This isn't just about me anymore. If I don't go, they won't stop. They'll keep coming and they'll never leave us alone. You don't owe them anything, Claire said fiercely. You're human, Harper. You don't belong to them. I don't belong to anyone, Harper said, her voice steady despite the tears. But I have to do this. For the child. For all of us. Dr. Moreau placed a hand on Claire's shoulder, his expression somber. She's right. If Harper is connected to them, this might be the only way to ensure peace. Claire glared at him but said nothing, her jaw clenched tightly. Harper turned back to the creature, holding the child close to her chest. I'll go, she said. But the child stays here. It's not ready for whatever's out there. The creature hesitated, then nodded once, its massive frame relaxing slightly. Harper let out a shaky breath, her decision made. Harper stood in the storm, her body trembling as she tried to muster the courage to follow the creature into the woods. The rain soaked through her clothes, the cold biting against her skin, but none of it registered. All she could think about was the tiny being cradled in her arms, chirping softly as if sensing her fear. It pressed closer to her chest, its warmth a fragile comfort amidst the chaos. Claire grabbed her arm suddenly, her nails digging in. Don't do this, she pleaded, her voice breaking. We'll figure something else out. You don't have to go with them. Harper looked at her, tears blurring her vision. I can't stay, she whispered. You saw what happened when they came. They won't stop. I have to end this, Claire. I have to protect it. Protect all of you. Claire's eyes glistened with tears. What if they hurt you? What if you don't come back? Harper forced a weak smile. You've always been the strong one, Claire. Something happens to me, just take care of it, okay? Make sure it knows it's loved. Claire opened her mouth to argue, but no words came out. She let go of Harper's arm, stepping back reluctantly. You'd better come back, she said finally, her voice thick with emotion. I'm not raising a baby lizard on my own. Harper let out a soft laugh, though it was more a reflex than genuine. She turned to Dr. Moreau, who had been silently watching the exchange. Will you help her? She asked. If I don't make it back. Dr. Moreau nodded solemnly. I'll do everything I can. But Harper, if there's even a chance to learn more about this, about what's happening, please try to understand it. For all of us. I'll try, Harper said, though her voice lacked conviction. She glanced down at the creature in her arms one last time, its glowing eyes meeting hers with an almost pleading expression. Stay here, she whispered, placing it gently on the table. You'll be safe with them. The creature chirped again, reaching out with one tiny claw as if trying to cling to her. Harper's heart broke, but she turned away before she could change her mind. She stepped off the porch, her bare feet sinking into the muddy ground, and walked toward the larger creature. The others in the woods parted as she approached, their glowing eyes fixed on her. The larger creature waited until she was beside it, then turned and began to lead her into the forest. Harper glanced back once, her eyes meeting Claire's. The look on her friend's face was a mix of fear, sorrow, and defiance. And then Harper disappeared into the trees. The forest was alive with an otherworldly energy. The rain seemed to lessen as they moved deeper into the woods, the storm's howling winds replaced by an eerie, almost reverent silence. Harper followed the larger creature, her heart pounding with each step. The glowing eyes of the others surrounded her, their presence both comforting and unsettling. The journey felt endless, though Harper knew it couldn't have been more than an hour before they arrived at a clearing. In the center stood a massive stone, its surface covered in intricate carvings that pulsed faintly with the same glow as the creature's eyes. Harper's breath caught in her throat. It was the same kind of stone she had touched in the jungle, though this one was far larger, its energy palpable even from a distance. The larger creature stepped aside, motioning for her to approach the stone. Harper hesitated, her legs trembling. "What do you want me to do?" she asked, her voice barely audible. The creature didn't answer, but its gaze shifted to the stone. Harper took a deep breath and stepped forward, her fingers brushing against the cool, glowing surface. The moment she made contact, a surge of energy shot through her, and her mind was flooded with images once again. She saw the history of the creatures, beings from another realm, guardians of a fragile balance between worlds. The stones were their anchors, their lifelines, and the energy that Harper had absorbed had tied her to them. Her child was a bridge, a new connection that could either strengthen their existence or destroy it entirely. And then she saw something else, a warning. A shadowy figure, human yet monstrous, standing over a shattered stone. The creatures were fleeing, their glowing eyes dimming as their connection to their world faded. Harper's child was the key to stopping this, to preserving both their world and hers. When the vision ended, Harper staggered back, her body shaking. The larger creature steadied her with one clawed hand, its eyes filled with understanding. "You need me to protect it," she said, the realization hitting her like a blow. "To protect the child?" The creature nodded, its gaze steady. "But how?" Harper asked, her voice breaking. "I don't know how to do this." The creature placed its other hand over her chest, directly above her heart. A warmth spread through her, soothing her frayed nerves. Harper closed her eyes, letting the energy wash over her. When she opened them again, the creature had stepped back, its expression one of quiet resignation. "I'll do it," Harper said, her voice firm. "I'll protect it. I promise." The larger creature let out a low, rumbling sound that Harper somehow understood as approval. Slowly, the others began to retreat into the shadows, their glowing eyes fading until only the larger one remained. It gave her one last lingering look before turning and disappearing into the woods. Harper stood alone in the clearing, the stone's glow dimming until it was nothing more than a faint shimmer. She knew what she had to do now, even if the weight of it felt overwhelming. When Harper returned to the cabin, Claire and Dr. Moreau were waiting anxiously. The moment they saw her, Claire ran to her, pulling her into a tight embrace. "You're okay," Claire whispered, relief flooding her voice. "I thought." "I'm okay," Harper said, though her voice was tinged with exhaustion. She stepped inside, her eyes immediately finding the creature on the table. It chirped excitedly, reaching out to her, and Harper scooped it up, holding it close. "What happened out there?" Dr. Moreau asked, his curiosity barely contained. "They showed me what's at stake," Harper said, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. "This child, it's more than just mine. It's the bridge between worlds. If something happens to it, we're all in danger." Claire frowned. "So what do we do now?" Harper looked down at the creature, its glowing eyes meeting hers with an unspoken trust. "We keep it safe," she said. "No matter what." Outside, the storm began to subside, the woods growing quiet once more. But Harper knew this was only the beginning. The forces that had brought her to this moment weren't finished, and the danger was far from over. But for now she had her child. And that was enough.